Witamy Państwa bardzo serdecznie.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wojciech Fudala and my name is Justyna, Boduch. We are delighted to be able to meet you face to face for the first time in 2 years. Recently, all of our events have been held online, so it is a great pleasure to be able to see you face to face, and we're happy to have our special guests with us here on site as well. We'd like to welcome the speaker. I'd like to welcome our esteemed guests. The Masters of Architecture is a series of talks organized by the Association of Polish Architects, branch in Katowice. They have been organized for many years, and we have hosted many architects that have discussed the main trends in global architecture. Wojciech Małecki is the brains behind this series of talks. He is not here today, but I would like to welcome all of our other guests, including the president of the Katowice branch of the Association of Polish Architects, Mr. Machulik. Hopefully, we will be able to hear from him. I would like to ask him for some opening remarks at this point. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will hit the ground running because I have now finished my participation in another debate. Well, this series of talks, the cycle, is quite a famous one. We will soon publish a book. Have you mentioned the book? No, you have not. So yes, let me disclose it openly. We will have a book that will summarize the 15-year-long history of this series. So stay tuned, look out for the book, and you're all welcome here today. Thank you very much for these opening remarks. The Masters of Architecture series is present in social media, including Facebook, and this event is also being broadcast on Facebook. So if you could not be here on site today, you are welcome to follow us online. We also have our Twitter and Instagram accounts. We will announce a competition on Instagram today, right after our speaker takes the floor. There will be a photograph of a book that will be published. It will be a book that you will be able to win right at the end of the lecture. The contest is very easy. You just have to post a question to our special guests. The question will be asked, and you'll be able to win this book authored by our special guests. So once again, welcome. Follow our Instagram page. There will be a post inviting you to ask questions. If you're one of the winners, you will receive a book. I'd like to thank our partners who make this series possible, including Rehau, a company that is known for producing polymers and furniture-related products. Tomasz Chmielarz, representing the company, is here with us today. I'd like to thank Furnico, a company that produces office furniture. I'd like to thank Aliplast. We have a representative of the company with us, Joanna Domagała. I would like to invite Joanna Domagała to join me here up on the stage and tell us a little bit more about the profile of the company.
Jeszcze raz bardzo dziękujemy. Duże brawa dla
Once
firmy
again,
Knauf.
thank you very much. And now
I dziękujemy również naszym
let's give a
pozostałym
big
partnerom,
hand to
firmie
Knauf. And also
Aliplast,
we'd like
firmie
to thank
Furnico
our
oraz firmie Rehau,
partners,
która ufundowała również
our
dodatkowe
partners
nagrody dla zwycięzców
that
naszego
funded
konkursu.
additional
A
prizes for the
przypominamy,
winners of our
że
competition.
nagrodami głównymi
And we'd
będą
like to
dwie
remind
książki.
you that two
Książka
books will
New
be the
European
main prizes.
Architecture oraz
New European
publikacja
Architecture
Alternative Histories autorstwa
Alternative
naszego mistrza
Histories
architektury Jörga Leesera.
written by Jörg
Konkurs zostanie
Leeser.
ogłoszony już zaraz po
The competition will be announced
na naszym profilu na Instagramie.
immediately after the lecture begins. It will be announced on Instagram. We have had an opportunity to host a number of famous world architects with their own, speaking about their visions about the future. future. For example, Dietmar Edinburgh represented office buildings that generated energy. Juan Carlos Romero focused on technologies, and he spoke about mobile hospitals that were used during the pandemic. These were examples of container architecture. Norman Foster's office presented habitats on Mars. And our guest today, Mr. Jörg Leeser, develops do-it-yourself housing estates. These are the housing estates that are constructed by their future residents.
Thank you very much for coming here today. Thank you to all of you also watching our event online on the Masters of Architecture Facebook channel and the 4 Design Days Facebook page. Today we have a pleasure of hosting a great architect, but also a great urbanist. So I'm not going to talk very much because I'm sure that his work is going to speak for itself. So please welcome and give a big applause to Mr. Jörg Leeser.
Yeah, hello, I'm very happy to be here in real person, body. I transported my body from Cologne to Katowice in these strange times. And I hope I can, in the next hour or so, I can give you some insights on how we work in our office and what are the thoughts behind our projects. The overall structure of my lecture is going to be from abstract to contextual. That means I'm trying to elaborate on absolute architecture in the beginning, and I'm going to end with a very referential, contextual architecture that we're doing right now. When my wife and I founded the office 22 years ago, we did not necessarily know that we would end up doing a lot of strange projects. It seems to be that we attract strangeness, and over the years we feel very comfortable doing these projects. The first project I'm going to show is a production plant that we realized in Słubice in Poland, and I'm very happy that I can present a Polish project here. For us, it was our first project abroad, not in our vicinity. And it was a very strange place, a special economic zone right next to the border of Germany. And this is the client on his lot. So it's very much a nothingness. There is no urbanism. Architecture in industrial parks is non-architecture. You usually have boxes with maybe funky colors, but people don't seem to pay a lot of attention to industrial architecture. We took our job very seriously, and we're interested in this neutrality that industrial architecture demands. And what we're seeing here right now is one of our favorite projects in the history of architecture. It's called No Stop City by the Italian office Archizoom from the 1960s. And it's an endless world of conditioned space where you don't exactly know where it starts and where it ends. It's as abstract as architecture can get. And When our clients asked us to start designing, we looked at their products first, and they're doing automation sensorical elements for robotic machinery. And we were surprised to find the production line being a very manual assembly. So you have a table, a trolley, and some shelves, and they are assembled in clusters of production. And while we were drawing these clusters, we discovered the beauty of this process, and actually got carried away with the geometry of the hexagon as an endless system that could be as flexible as possible. We overlapped this hexagonal grid with an orthogonal grid, and you may ask why would construction industrial plant be a circle? But this is pure physics. The most expensive part of a building is its facade, and a drum or a cylinder has less surface to its volume than a box has. We also proved that you could have all different kinds of setups in this factory, and so let's say we almost overdid the autonomous structure. That it's a celebration of the geometry of the hexagon and the circle. This is the actual floor plan. The building has one opening, or actually has two openings, one window and one door. It has 3 sanitary cores, and the rest is completely up to whatever you want to do in it. So it's a non-figurative, non-picturesque, non-rhetoric, non-narrative and non-referential architecture. So there is basically no context. But of course that's not true. There is a context, in this case, for instance, the sustainability. We finished this building in 2006, and for us it was important that it had a minimum carbon dioxide footprint, and so the construction is in wood. We miscalculated. We thought there's so much wood in Poland that it could be produced entirely here, but as a matter of fact, the construction company that built the building bought the wood in Finland. It was transported to Austria to be laminated, then back to Lithuania, where the team, the construction team was, and then onto the site in Poland. So I hope these processes in the future or in the present will not be as global as our process was, because that is a very important issue in architecture. So we minimized the construction to a structural wooden grid of width of 6 centimeters. The columns are in steel. And what also was very important is we had a very tiny budget, actually not more money than you would have without architecture, but we could convince the client that natural light in the building would be a great benefit to everyone, to the workers and the health of the people who work in the office, in the building. So we have a roof of skylights, and this is the only window of the building. It's actually a gap in the industrial park where you look into the beautiful scenery next to the river Oder. The cafeteria of the building, the entrance door, and what looks like a metal-clad facade is actually a very cheap material. It's bituminous foil covered in laminated with a very thin layer of aluminum. And we liked the craftsmanship of this material, and it actually became some sort of ornament to the building. The facade also works as a reflector to the exterior parking lot. This is the last, the last image of that project. I think the next project is even a bit stranger. We participated in a competition in Hamburg for a building in the category of smart price. A housing competition. The building had to be, the building costs, the construction costs were supposed to be lower than 1,000 euro per square meter. And we came up with a system of base and infill. That means we wanted to have a professionally erected base skeleton and an infill that could be built in a self-built technique by the inhabitants. There is, interestingly enough, even Germany you wouldn't think that Germany is such a self-built country, but outside of architecture, people invest a lot of money in do-it-yourself superstore equipment. They build their own sheds. There's so much creativity and dynamic that we thought this could be utilized for the production of low-cost housing. We used the Maison Domino system of Le Corbusier, the free open plan. And as a matter of fact, when you travel the world, you find that Corbusier's domino system is actually one of the most popular construction methods around the globe, usually in poor areas where there are self-built. So people team up with their family, they try to minimize the concrete because that is more expensive than the bricks, and build their own house. This is an image from Sao Paulo in Brazil. So with this concept, we actually did win the competition. But there was still a little problem. There was no client. And with this client, we were supposed to find the clients by ourselves. And we toured around Hamburg and talked to a lot of professional developers. And of course, they were not familiar with the self-built concept. But we were very lucky to find Achim Nagel of Primus Developments, who was brave enough to tackle this feat. Concept is very easy. The concrete is cold, and whatever the settlers, we called them settlers, build themselves, they insulate their own unit. That makes them independent from each other. So if someone breaks his leg and cannot proceed with his construction, the others can still move into the buildings without having heat leaks. Our grid for the base shell is a little bit different than the Corbusier domino system. And this has to do, I mean, it's absolutely minimized. Vertical circulation is an elevator and a minimized staircase. And when you look at the cores, they are distributed in a strange pattern, which has to do with a spatial system that we were fascinated with. That means having floor plans without hallways and circulation rooms that are somewhat useless. We wanted to have an endless, what is called enfilade in French architectural terms. So one room next to each other, they're all connected, and they can be programmed either way you want them to do. So we developed this spatial system as a kind of guideline to the settlers. They were not forced to build this. They, like from the building permit, all the load-bearing parts were already in the structural shelf. So all the walls built by the settlers are not load-bearing. That means you can put them wherever you want to. And when you work as an architect with amateurs, you have to be prepared that they don't necessarily follow your ideas. So that's part of the game, that you step back and let them do it. So we had lots of workshops with the settlers, which actually led to a lot of floor plans that are a bit different from what we thought we wanted. People opted for a more open floor plan, more loft-like structures with defined functions. The living room as a huge open space and small private rooms in the north. And then actually there was this day in October 2012 where the shelf was finished and the settlers moved in. So one thing we learned was you shouldn't start a settler construction site in October, because when this picture was taken, Herr Burmeister, it was about -12 degrees outside. So next time we do it, we start in spring so they can work during the summer. We prepared a manual for the settlers of 200 pages that you can download on our internet website, where each individual construction step is documented and described, and you can build your own unit with this manual. That means outside walls, window, put in the windows, the technical installation, and the plastering, if you like. It was interesting that a lot of people were scared to do the outside bricklaying, which there is no reason they would need to be scared of, because it's a rather easy job. We used a light concrete thermoblock, and one, of course, asks oneself, what is a building going to look like if 14 different people build their own units? They could agree on a certain facade or have little differences. So this is not our building, but in Sicily, just some vernacular building, probably built without a permit. And as our building was part of the International Building Exhibition, the head planner of Hamburg said, this is the first time I'm asking an architectural office to do a facade as wild as possible. And we were very happy to have this permission to do that, but we hadn't talked to the settlers yet, because for them, they didn't think it was a funny idea to have a crazy building. People in Hamburg are quite decent. They don't want to be exposed. So they actually asked us and said, we want a common facade. Please design a facade that is not different from each unit. So we designed a set of elements that still could be customized with plans, and there are different, like for instance, these hooks in the ceiling are installations for during the construction phase, a net was fixed to them, so you had safe building conditions. And it turned out that in the end, they articulated their individuality with colors to, so there was an agreement on a set of colors and on certain areas of the building. I think over the course of the last few years, it has grown in. I think it's going to be more individualized. And the interesting thing about that project was that Alejandro Aravena, the architect of Elemental, and the director of the Venice Biennale in 2016 asked us to be part of the exhibition. And we took this Grundbau und Siedler project onto an urbanistic level, because it was the year of 2015, and as you recall, there were millions of refugees coming to Germany, and Germany agreed on opening its borders, and we welcomed this open policy and speculated on the idea of what kind of growth is that going to produce in Germany and how can that be handled. And interesting enough, this was not the first time that millions of migrants came to Germany. In 1946, 12 million people moved from Eastern Europe to the remaining part of the German territory, and they were housed in a 10-year housing program that built settlements for them. It was very much top-down planning. That means there was had centralized planning. People didn't have a choice. They were placed in cities they had to go to. And of course, this new migration for us, we wanted this to be not a forced migration, but a voluntary one. So people could go wherever they wanted to, and that means go to the metropolises. And they should be able to participate in the process of urbanization. We picked 5 different cities. One was, as an example, the city of Bielefeld-Sennestadt, which is a typical example of the 1950s refugee city extensions. And we picked Duisburg, Munich, Leipzig, and Hamburg, and put up a certain set of rules. That means find the cheapest lots with a good connection to public transport. We wanted to have an FAR, that means in German GFZ, of 2.0, so quite a dense urban fabric, which is more than here we see the 1950s example of Bielefeld-Sennestadt. Pretty much a monotonous pattern. People are not unhappy in these neighborhoods, but from our point of view today, this does not look like a feasible solution for a mass housing problem. So our scheme looked for a more diverse, what we called elastic urbanism. We wanted mix. We wanted housing mixed with office space and workshop space, and we picked places that, I mean, that actually, it's interesting, there are not that many places left if you want to stay in the, let's say, the inner city perimeter. In Munich, we had to go as far as 30 kilometers outside to find a feasible lot with a price of less than 200 euros per square meter. And then we wanted to have the people work on these new settlements. It was a real research project that we started in the office, but both of us, my wife and me, we both teach at universities. I'm teaching at Düsseldorf, my wife is teaching in Aachen. So we had a large group of students that helped us with this project. So this is the city of Leipzig, a former railroad station that is abandoned, and we added densification to that area. So what you see here are the socialist housing slabs of the 1960s, and we kind of put them in an envelope of smaller structures. Leipzig. I'm very fond of our Duisburg scheme. Duisburg is an industrial city north of Düsseldorf, coal mining, steel production. And this is also a former railroad freight yard. And we like the idea that the space retains a kind of industrial scale. So have an oversized square that can be used in many ways. I mean, it's probably you in this region have an understanding of that kind of urbanism, because there's a certain openness to this architecture. Whereas the semicircular building, for instance, is contextual, because it's the base of a former railroad rotation. How would you call that? Roundhouse. Actually, it's called roundhouse. Yeah. While we were doing this, we especially invested a lot of thought into the typologies that could be erected in self-built techniques, all in this mixed technique that we proposed for Grundbau und Siedler, so that you have a base that is professionally built and an infill that could be done by settlers. And we had different degrees of do-it-yourself potential. So sometimes the facade was already finished, but others would even be 2 stories high. So you could have put in your own ceilings. I'm just going to move quickly through these types. Double row house, we stacked 2 rows of houses on top of each other. Doppelgänger means, what does Doppelgänger? That's the duplicate. It's a duplicate of a courtyard. So this building duplicates itself. Here you see it in Munich. Double height, 2/3 volumes, and apartment with shifted plans. We were actually, the Hamburg unit was actually meant to be built, but hasn't come through yet. So that's one thing you really learn when you do architecture. You better plan to grow old and stay healthy, because a lot of projects take an awful lot of time. I'm jumping to another housing project that we are busy with doing at the moment. Its groundbreaking has already happened. It's in the city of Neuenburg, which is in northern Bavaria, so pretty much south from us in Cologne. And it's a beautiful medieval city. It has a certain suburbia around it. And this was also a competition, and we were asked, the client is a cooperative of senior citizens. That means people who intentionally move together, and they are looking for a communal life and want to live in walking distance of the city center of this little city. Ironically, the lot they bought is right next to the graveyard, but that might also be, at a certain moment in life, could be very convenient if your partner already moved to the graveyard and you still live in the cooperative. The site had a topography, and what we discovered was that this topography had the perfect angle for handicapped ramp, 6 degrees. And so the entire building was designed along this angle, this ramp angle. And I'm starting here with the shed. It's not the housing unit, but it's actually the parking garage. We believe that this parking garage will not be a parking garage for very much longer. A lot of people will sell their cars and have other modes of transportation, of car sharing. So this shed can be utilized for other functions, as a workshop, as a party place, as a storage place. The ramp leads all the way along the building, as you can see here. And this is also an idea about the, let's say, the social aspects of a cooperative building. People want to meet, and we decided that it would be great if this space along the ramp would have kind of a buffer zone, which you find, for instance, in American architecture, which is called the porch. You have a veranda, a balcony that sometimes could be enclosed with windows, which is kind of a buffer between your private apartment and the public space. In America, we know this from many movies where a grandma or grandpa are sitting in the rocking chair on the porch and enjoying life. As you can see here in the south of the United States of America. And we, I think that was one of the reasons why we won the competition. People believed in this idea of a, let's say, an interstitial space, a space that you have options. You can either use it as a buffer, or you can step out and talk to your neighbors. It's facing south, of course, and the unit itself is also a very flexible architecture. It just has it's basically the walls, the separation walls between the units are load-bearing, and there's one column in the middle, and along this column, that's like the organizational spine of each unit. You have the bathroom, of course, it's all handicap able. And when you choose one of these units, you have so many options of how to configure your space. And as a matter of fact, I think each of the 19 units we have, they're all different. Everyone has made their own choices. And of course, the units also have different sizes. And we were very literal about that size. So the smallest are in the west, and the biggest are in the east. What is drawn in red is the communal space. They have one common room where you can have festivities or just cook together. And that actually came later in the process. To the very left is the janitor's, the superintendent's apartment. This is the northern, the private facade. Let's put it this way. We meant this building to be built in timber construction. which we think is a very sustainable method of construction. But unfortunately, in this region of Germany, timber construction is more expensive than masonry. So we had to redesign the building in bricks. This also led to minimization of these windows. So as an architect, you always have to be prepared for the process to come. Things change. And we were very happy that our project could adapt to this change in construction. And as the shed will still be in timber. Yeah. So this was already, as I said, from pure structure to the spatial system of the Grundbau und Siedler project. The Neuenbürger cooperative building already had a little bit of context. And now I'm presenting an urban project that we are busy developing at the moment. It's a new garden city for Hamburg called Oehndorf. So as maybe you know that Hamburg is a state in itself. So the city of Hamburg is also one of the federal states of Germany. And so it has a very limited territory. There is hardly any space left for further development. But Hamburg is a booming city, and prices, rents are skyrocketing. So the city is actually forced to utilize green fields, and this is a very controversial issue. How do you develop a green field nowadays? I mean, this is something we always want to avoid. We don't want to cover the earth in concrete, but this conflict cannot be solved by just abandoning further urban development, because this would produce social upheaval. And in this case, the scenery, the landscape of that rural patch was very picturesque. It's called Knicks. You have trees and hedges along little dams, along pastures. It's a wonderful biotope, lots of birds and insects. And we wrestled with the beauty of that area and let's say the value of the biotopes that were there. And we said it must be possible to develop this urbanistically as well as preserve the biotopes. And so we said we don't want to destroy any of these knicks. All the trees should remain in place. Of course, the pastures would be developed, but we wanted to have the synergy of both. That means that we could only build buildings in a certain distance to the lines of trees, so the biotopes would still be intact. There's a great project by Archizoom, not Archizoom, but Archigram this time, from England. It's called Behind the Hedges, an idea of how you can develop the beautiful landscape of England without noticing. So all the settlements would hide behind the hedges. In our case, we had a different approach. We thought of these pastures as sort of Rococo rooms, where, you know, in Rococo palaces, the ornament, the vegetative ornament dissolves into space. So let's say the encircling walls of the spaces are made out of vegetation. And our idea was to place the housing clusters in the middle of the pastures, and so that every unit would have a view into the landscape on the outside, and on the inside you would have a communal courtyard where people can gather and form a neighborhood. Of course, there is a complex set of layers when you do urban design, especially if you are dealing with ecology. So there's wind, there's sun, there's water, groundwater, there's sound, animal biotopes, there's a movement of people and traffic, of course, and there's construction methods that also have something to do with fire protection laws. So in order to have a sustainable timber construction building, for instance in Hamburg, you have to have certain distances for the fire truck to come to if it burns, and buildings are limited to a height of 5 floors. If you overlay all these parameters, you kind of you get a superimposition of different zones, and this of course creates the forms of the buildings that we placed there, with ecology being the leading force. The biotopes as a network, the idea of courtyards as a social condenser. And if you see that in figure ground plan, it's a mix between urban structures and rural structures. So we thought, I think it is very important, especially if you work in a suburban context, that you create an identity of a space. And when you look at the surrounding texture, you see it's kind of the how would you say that? It's kind of a grayish distribution of single-family houses that do not create urban spaces at all. So this is the communities that we designed. Of course, we also wanted this to be a mixed development to a certain degree. So in this matrix, you see all the different parameters, how they inform the different typologies. Again, things we've started with this project, I think, 2 years ago. Things develop and there are always setbacks. In this case, it's mobility. You would think that a city like Hamburg would openly welcome other forms of transportation but the automobile. But at the moment, with the laws that we have at the moment, we still need to provide 0.8 car parking spaces per unit, I think. So we have an awful lot of parking places, which I believe with the autonomous cars approaching very soon will be obsolete. We are anticipating this, that these parking lots will be obsolete by providing removable structures that can then be built back if they're not needed anymore. This is, for instance, the radius of the fire brigades. And just to give you a few impressions of the typologies of these courtyard landscape conglomerates, I would say. This is the school and also a social center. To the north of the site, you see actually urban farming. So that's already introduced in the urban master plan that there will be urban farming in close vicinity. I wonder what makes this not react. One of our beautiful drawings. And we also formulated a sort of manifesto for the project, how to lead an ecological life in this suburban setting. So we will have 2,000 units. Each of these units will have a direct connection to the open landscape. People will farm in a community. Of course, this is voluntarily and not mandatory, but it's let's say community is a very important issue in this project. It's a process of participation, and the construction methods are already predefined in the urban scale. So the individual buildings have to obey to certain construction techniques. The bicycle, of course, is the main mode of transportation. And this is an impression of, let's say, a breakfast table in one of the housing units. One of the courtyards in what we call the Circus Maximus complex. I already mentioned the technique of participation. And in this project that we're doing with NL Architects from Amsterdam, as a let's say, double-binded team, there are also 3 other offices involved in this project that are La Carton Vassal, IV, and Feld 72. We were asked to do a master plan for a site in a very special condition in Hamburg, the Reeperbahn, which is sort of a traditional Las Vegas red light district amusement neighborhood. So these are images from the 19th century. And it still is a very weird, wild place with a wild neighborhood and a wild community. And these 2 modernistic slabs were adjacent to the Spielbudenplatz, the big square in that neighborhood. And they were bought by a Bavarian investor, which led to social upheaval because people didn't want to get expelled from these cheap rental apartments. It was a time of riots. Actually, it ended with the demolition of the buildings. At a certain moment in time, they realized that they were not structurally safe anymore. But in this difficult social context, the city of Hamburg decided to appoint a group of artists and sociologists that formed a collective called the Planbude. And they were the, let's say, the representatives of the neighborhood, the community, and part of each of the different design steps in the project. So they were there from begin on, and they actually wrote the brief. And this was not a normal brief that you get in an architectural competition. It had 200 pages. And the interesting thing was it climaxed in a set of rules. And these set of rules had to be obeyed by the architectural schemes. So diversity instead of uniformity, small-scaled, affordable instead of expensive, originality and tolerance, appropriation and vitality, experiment and subculture, public space without the disappeared commerce. So this is something for a private developer that is difficult to cope with. But the interesting thing was that the motives of the investor and the community, they could match on certain issues. For instance, density. So this was then agreed on to have a super high density of 4.7. So almost 5 times the area could be built completely. And we opted for a rather traditional perimeter block system in plan. We added a little alley, and we wanted to have as many doors as possible to create a lively neighborhood. We then looked at the possibilities of splitting the lot into different units to be developed, and came up with a set of rules how each individual building would react to its surrounding buildings. So if there's a taller building in the middle, the building next door has to be lower. If across the street is a tall building, the lower building across the street has to move back. So it's quite a complex, let's say, air right system. We introduced firewalls as the basis of that system. Part of the Planbude St. Pauli code was that the roofs were supposed to be green and publicly accessible. Many models later, we didn't design these models to look pretty or beautiful. It was a kind of, there were many possibilities how they could be placed. They kind of optimized themselves. And you could say, if you're a little bit familiar with Belgium, for instance, Brussels or Liège, you could find similarities in this pattern of the distribution of volumes. That's the floor plan. And this was our Spielbudenplatz perspective. And yes, we did win the competition for the urban master plan. What followed was competitions for the individual buildings. Fortunately, NL Architects and BeL were able to, we won the large hotel adjacent to the square and a housing unit in the corner. And this is an interesting question of when we think of the first amendment of the St. Pauli Code, it's diversity. So what is diversity? And this is a sketch by Jane Jacobs, the famous American sociologist. So a myth is diversity is ugly. Jane Jacobs says homogeneity is boring and disorientating. Forced diversity is dishonest. So the question is, what is honest diversity? And she says real diversity in uses is the city. In the Planbude, they asked the public in over a time of, I think, 6 months. They got more than 2,000 submissions on fantasies about that place. And this is one of the sketches that we saw. And we thought, it doesn't get any better than this. So we don't know how old that child was that drew this, this elevation, but we felt we should obey these ideas of the people that participated in the Planbude process. These are renderings from the next phase when it was on the individual architectural projects. This is our gradient building, the housing complex in the south with the basketball court on the roof. Some impressions of the model. And I think this is an opportunity to give you some insights on how do you design complexity or diversity. And we used this little Grand Hotel in Belgium, in Knokke, as a model. So this was the hotel when it was founded. A few years later, they added 3 floors because the hotel was a success. And it got even more successful. It bought the adjacent lot and erected another wing of the hotel. And even a 3rd wing was erected. So we thought, this is great. Our hotel should follow these ideas of the Grand Hotel in Knokke. And we also found references in the neighborhood of St. Pauli. We took this picture where you don't exactly know where one unit ends and the other one starts, whether this is one building or 2, who owns what, who's using what. There's a beautiful blur of this vernacular architecture. And I think this is one of the main principles of our design, that it uses multiple references. Wherever we can get references, we kind of infuse them into the project. So ruins in Egypt, follies in English landscape gardens, prefab construction, something very rough and brutal, gives this, I mean, St. Pauli is a rough neighborhood. And this all is fed into the design process and finds its choices in it. So the principle of repetition and a window per room and something as classical as a rustico melts together in this hotel tower with a climbing wall on the east-facing facade. And yes, there is a certain nostalgia in the project. I think it is. So hotel in Cannes mutates to a kind of modernistic type in Vienna, met with the Hotel Hungaria in Venice on the Lido, with beautiful tiles, or Max Fabiani in Vienna. And there's a context. These are tiles from St. Pauli. So the middle part of the hotel is tiled. Curtain wall. We very much admire SOM and like the heroes of modern architecture. Could it be possible that a curtain wall could be mixed with a load-bearing wall? Of course, this sounds very dangerous, but you can find this in beautiful 1950s examples. This is in Cologne. A corner problem is always an invitation to kind of find solutions. And in this case, we kind of overdid the problem. We wanted things to clash in the corner to show that, you know, everything comes together. It's kind of like an architectural implosion. So every joint, it's measures of blur that we introduce. We want things to kind of interlock. We want things to be able to be peeled off, and there's no honesty in the project. It's all about being a magician, kind of playing tricks. And this is not our rendering, but it's the investor's rendering. And they're very proud of the project, and they're proud of these. Oh no, that doesn't work. When you look at the ventilation shafts on the facade, this is something usually people want to hide, and we just expose it. This is a rough building. It's a nightlife area. I mean, in this case, there's a certain honesty in the project. Yeah, it's covered with ads. It has firewalls, handrails. Its structure, its infrastructure. So on each individual layer, you can introduce architecture. You can ask questions. You use prefab constructions, and you just simply enjoy this happy eclecticism of building techniques. Last project. The competition was a cultural center in a small city in Belgium. The site had a 1960s printing factory, and it was up to the competitors to decide whether to demolish the building or not. And we looked at that building and loved it from the very first moment. And we thought we couldn't do it any harm. We wanted to keep it. And at the same time, we had a very complex brief of a cultural center that contained a library, an archive, theater school, music school, a huge auditorium, and art school. So this is the context. Well kept, beautiful spaces, and with a kind of museum of printing technologies in it. And we actually inscribed this cultural center into the existing factory. We looked very closely at the structural grids of the building and looked at a lot of references for cultural centers. There are several in Belgium, and we looked worldwide. This is our functional diagram, and it turned out that this T-shaped floor plan was a very good let's say, a distribution system for a circulation system for the building. So all we did was basically just develop a kit of parts how you could inhabit this building. And so blue is the archive, pink is the library, yellow is the auditorium, and then there are classrooms and so on and so on. And they fit smoothly into the building with an extension on the top. We have 2 volumes on the roof. And the auditorium is this is like a multi-programmed space. It's auditorium and reading a room for the library and entrance at the same time. So can be configured with curtains and folding walls. So it's the heart of the building, I would say. Yeah, they liked it. They commissioned us with the design of the building. We are in the process of submitting the building permit at this very moment. And we are looking forward for the construction of the building starting this summer. And I'll end with a few impressions of the facade, which is multi-layered. I mean, as you know, dealing with old buildings is not always easy insulation-wise. So you have to have a kind of second skin above the facade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jörg. It was a really amazing lecture. Now it's time to announce the results of our competition. So Justyna will show you what our audience has asked. So you can choose. Nadal zachęcamy was do zadawania pytań. Nagroda nie jest jedna, także
questions. We have more than one prize waiting for you, so still you can ask your questions on our Instagram page.
I see Mr. Rainer Machlan
Widzę, że jest z nami pan Rainer Machlan.
So that's the first time that during the Masters of Architecture lecture we have our previous Master of Architecture among the audience, so we can give him also a big applause. So hello, Mr. Mahlameki. I would also like to say that you can meet Mr. Leeser tomorrow as he participates in another panel discussion about city reset, which takes place in the same auditorium at 9:30. So that's the first panel during tomorrow for Design Days conference. So we encourage you to come and to be there. Jörg, have you already chosen your favorite question?
I have two more.
Okay. Tak, oczywiście. To zadamy najpierw pytania,
So
które
we will
ludzie pisali w
start
internecie
by
i
asking
później będzie jeszcze
questions
czas na
posted
zadanie pytań na
online,
sali.
and then we will take questions from the floor or from the audience rather as well.
Mamy zwycięzcę.
We know who the winner is.
Do you think the IA project are right for Eastern European countries where aesthetic expression is strong, very individual, and unrelated towards the main architectural ideas? The winner is Anne-Julchen.
Gratulujemy. Czy uczestnik jest tutaj z nami na sali, czy jest to uczestnik
Is the
online?
winner here on site, or is this an online participant? You are here with us.
Choose your prize.
Zapraszam na scenę.
Okay, Jörg, and I think you can already answer this question.
Yeah, I like this question. Sorry. I like this question because I think it's true. With this do-it-yourself processes, if they are channeled in the right direction and into urban density, that's a huge potential And I think, especially for Eastern European countries where there's so much energy and dynamic in self-built potential. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Okay, congratulations. So now you can choose your prize.
Bardzo dziękujemy, gratulacje.
So, do you
Zapraszamy
prefer the
do-
book New European Architecture or the Alternative Histories by Jörg Leeser?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's for you. You can give your signature somewhere there.
Thank you. And the next question is, in Poland, people are really oriented to build freely without any limitation on their parcels. What is resulting in suburban chaos? What would be your advice for Polish architects to offer people complete freedom by building anything they like on their parcels, but keeping in control aesthetic of their houses and overall urban organization? Katowice.
I to samo pytanie, jeśli uczestnik jest z nami na sali, to zapraszamy na scenę.
Is the person who
A
asked the
jeśli
question
nie, to
in the
bardzo
room?
prosimy
If
o
that is not the
przesłanie
case,
nam swojego adresu
we would like to
jakąkolwiek
ask
drogą,
the
albo na
person
Facebooku,
to
w wiadomości prywatnej,
send us
albo
their
na Instagramie.
their address. You
I
can
wtedy
use
prześlemy
our
nagrodę
Facebook
pod
page or
tym.
the Instagram page, and
Okay,
you
so,
will
the
receive the prize
the
by
guy who
regular
asked this
mail.
question is watching us online, so we will send him this book by post. So he's going to send us his address, so you can just answer this question.
Okay. I like this question because the question of law and regulations in combination with self-built projects is very important. And we were lucky to realize our project in Hamburg, where the Hamburg authorities were very creative. We sort of got a prototype, a permit for our project, where each individual mutation of the units of the settlers would then be approved later. And I think this is very important that, of course, we don't want pure chaos, especially not in an urban scale. I think the regulating it, introducing do-it-yourself techniques into master planned designs, I think that is a very valuable direction to travel. So it's not complete freedom, but let's say it's a creative use of regulations.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe now we'll ask one question from the audience here. Mamy wciąż nagrody pocieszenia od firmy Rechał. Także widziałem, że było jedno pytanie.
Prizes. I think there was one person in the room who wanted to ask a question.
Me, sir, my English is not very good, but I have one question. What do you think about very long and very expensive building of Philharmonie of Hamburg? Do you know, it was, for example, the cost of Katowice in radio symphony was 300 million złotych. Hamburg was, no, do you know? What do you think about? Thank you.
Yes. Huge buildings, or there are a lot of, let's say, failing projects in Germany at the moment where costs just explode. it has a lot to do with the democratic process, that in the beginning there is a number, a figure that people say it will cost, that everyone knows in the beginning they will never reach. But it's still the number that is politically decided on. And I think in the case of Hamburg, this was, of course, enormous. I think they wanted to build it for, I think, 150 million euros, and it's almost a billion, I think, now. Interestingly, the population of Hamburg, the people of Hamburg have accepted the high cost of that building. They're still proud of it. And I think future generations will not necessarily ask how expensive that building was. They will honor the beauty of its architecture. And of course, you can only you can only have these buildings if the community has enough resources to do so. But I have no answer on how this process can be stopped, because it's the same in Cologne. We have an opera house that is being refurbished. The price is at 650 million right now. It started with 130. It just seems to be unavoidable. Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who has any questions? So please raise your hand, as we still have some time. So perhaps we can check also our Instagram once again to ask one more question.
Okay. What advice would you give to young architects who are just in the beginning of their journey to become mature architects?
Who asked this question? It's by Snexus.
Snexus.
To zapraszamy na scenę po odbiór nagrody pocieszenia od firmy Rechał. Także gratulacje.
Dziękuję.
Thank you.
So my answer is be true to yourself, and you should. Most important thing is that you burn for architecture. Otherwise, if you just think it's a job, it's not going to be much fun. There's too much trouble being an architect for just doing it as a job. It has to be a dedication.
Okay, thank you.
So one more from Instagram.
And the last one question. Could you tell how much time per day you spend for designing or tasks connected to it? Do you have any favorite activity for take a rest?
Unfortunately, I spend not enough time for designing. There's too much other things to do. Fortunately, I've spent some time teaching, which is very much fun. What was the question? What is my favorite?
Do you have any favorite activity for take a rest?
Yes, I go jogging with my dog.
Right.
Okay, that's nice. This question was asked by a person that we know that is watching us online, so the prize will be available to get later in our office of Association of Polish Architects. So the last chance for you to ask a question here. So anybody, anything? Oh, I'm sure that you are interested in a lot of things that Jörg has been speaking about. So anyone brave? Okay, we have a question. tu nagroda.
I have a question about the design and rules in Germany. For example, when we want to build something in Poland, we have a lot of specific registration. The construction law is sometimes a little difficult, and you know, sometimes even architect didn't know what we should do the next step. What about in the Germany? You have also the law, the building law is complicated or not, and you know, you have one building in Poland, and you have comparing with is this law and registration for Germany and from Poland.
I have to say, building regulations in Germany are very complicated, and sometimes it's pure despair. You just don't know what to do. But I have to say the biggest building permit we ever submitted was the one in Poland. We had, I think those were 3 meters of folders that were submitted. And in no other project, not even the Hamburg project, which is 10 times as big as the factory, we've had that much of files that we have to submit.
Thank you very much. Dziękujemy wam za przybycie i za wysłuchanie
Thank you
wykładu.
for being here. Thank you for
Oddaję głos
listening
Wojtkowi.
to our lecture.
And
Wojtek,
thank you
over
to
to
you,
you.
especially for this really amazing lecture and for introducing your vision that may be an answer on how the future of architecture will be. So, of course, we also invite you to ask questions to Mr. Leeser privately after our meeting. So, once again, thank you very much to all of you, and big applause to our Master of Architecture, Jörg Leeser.